Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Joan Woodard. I don't make the final decision. I will be submitting my recommendation to staff within 2 weeks of this evening's hearing. The application will then be scheduled for deliberations before the county commissioners. If you wish to give testimony, I need you to make sure you've filled out one of the sheets on the side. And when you come to the podium, please be sure to give us your name and address for the record before you begin your testimony. First, staff will introduce the application. Then we will hear from the applicant. After the applicant's testimony, we will then get into the public comment sheets. We will hear from those who are in favor, those who are neutral, and then those who are opposed. And then we'll check and see if we have any folks on Zoom who would like to speak. The public not speaking will be read into the record. We will then give the applicant and/or their representative an opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony stated into the record from the public before we close the public hearing. After that point, we will receive no more testimony. The time limits are 30 minutes for the applicant's presentation, 3 minutes for public testimony, and 15 minutes for applicant rebuttal. I would ask that you direct all of your testimony to me and not to the audience. Are there any questions about this evening's proceedings? Doesn't look like there's any quizzical expression out there. Okay then. We will commence this evening with case number ZON 24-0003.
Good evening. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. Madam Hearing Examiner, as you just stated, this is a request for a zone change by Mr. Roy Armstrong, case number ZON 24-0003, and it's a request to rezone a 10-acre or 10.5-acre parcel of land from agriculture to agricultural suburban zone. The subject property is located between Highway 95 and Highway 41, more specifically west of Hutter Road and north of Mullan Road, adjacent to Highlands Golf Course Club. The subject property is relatively flat. There is some sparse vegetation, but it's currently undeveloped, and I believe it has been used for some agricultural or farming pursuits in the past. As I said, it's currently zoned agriculture. However, there are parcels in the area that are zoned agricultural suburban. You have parcels to the west and southwest of the subject site that are within the city limits of Post Falls. The comp plan designation is border, and the property is located within the city of Post Falls area of city impact. With every application that we process within the areas of city impact, we have to analyze, first of all, whether or not the subject request is located within the exclusive tier or the shared tier. The exclusive tier are those areas that are in close proximity to city limits, whereas the shared tier is further out on the periphery of the exclusive tier, further out from the city limits. When we met with the applicant on this matter, we advised them that there could be potential problems with the proposed zone change because the intent of this zone change is to be able to subdivide the property into 2 5-acre parcels. Now you may ask, why would the applicant be limited to only 5-acre parcels in this area, even though the agricultural suburban zone allows for parcels to be as small as 2 acres in size? The answer is fairly simple. It's located over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer based on the Panhandle Health District requirements and based on the newly adopted regulations under Article 7.3 of our Land Use and Development Code. Any development over the aquifer must have a density of 1 dwelling per 5 acres no greater than 1 dwelling per 5 acres if it's in the unincorporated area of Kootenai County and does not have a connection to a municipal sewer system. So the limitations on this property would be a maximum of 2 parcels, even though it's zoned, the request is for agricultural suburban. We advise the applicant that the exclusive tier has a list of limitations or requirements that the applicant has to adhere to, one of which is any development of the property must have connection to public sewer and water, and that any subdivision that would come subsequent to the proposed zone change would also have to have public water and public sewer. The reason that the request is being made, as you know, and for the public and for public knowledge, is agricultural zone prohibits subdivision of land. So the request is to be able to subdivide it. The applicant was advised of these requirements, and we directed them to speak with the city of Post Falls official to see whether or not they would support the zone change and potentially a subdivision in the future. While this request is for a zone change and a subsequent subdivision will be reviewed on its merits, it's important to understand the intent of this application so that the public understands why this is moving forward in the direction that it's headed. The applicant contacted us before submitting the application and advised us that they did have a conversation with the city, and they believe that the city would be open to perhaps waiving those requirements or some other recommendation at the time of a subdivision application should the zone change be approved. With that in mind, the applicant submitted an application. We proceeded with the review of it. These are some of the photos of the property in question. As you can see, it has good access to a public road. It's fairly level. And as I said, there's limited vegetation. It's all surrounded by fields. So a majority of development is to the southwest within the city limits of Post Falls. During the agency comment period, we did solicit comments from the agencies that you see listed on the slide before you, and no one was opposed. However, it did catch our eye that the city of Post Falls said they're neutral to the zone change, but they advised us that the ACI regulations would apply. I'm not sure what that means, whether or not they apply and they would be willing to waive them due to lack of services, or would they state that the county should deny a subsequent subdivision. That's a matter that will be addressed at some point through the subdivision process. It's not before us today, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind as a possible concern that staff still has. During the public comment period, we received only one comment in support of this application. And staff analysis, we find that the required findings for the proposed change have been met, and we find that should the zone change be approved and the city waives the ACI requirements, the applicant, the community development director will have the discretion to approve a minor subdivision. However, if the city upholds the ACI requirements, then the director will be obligated to deny the request. And that is pretty much the case with every zone change, or even those projects that go through a subdivisions that are within the zoning districts that allow for subdivisions to move forward, such as rural zoning or agricultural suburban for that matter. So it will be interesting to find out what will happen if this is approved and the applicant proceeds with a subdivision. However, we do find that, furthermore, we find that the zone change on its own does not represent any negative impact and is compatible and consistent with the surrounding development in the area. We stand for any questions that you have at this time.
I don't have any at this time for you, Vlad. Thanks. First, we'll hear from Brad Monschel. Marshall. Sorry.
Vlad's pulling up a little PowerPoint.
You can go ahead and get your name and address off the.
Sure. For the record, I'm Brad Marshall with JEB Engineers. Our address is 7825 Meadowlark Way, Coeur d'Alene, 83815. And a pleasure to represent the applicant, Roy Armstrong. I was thinking today that I've known and done work with Roy for over 25 years. Long time. There we go. Any way to enlarge that? Yeah, there we go. Gotta cover that page. Let's see. Again, we want to thank the hearing examiner for your time tonight, and also the staff for working for us. Having worked with Vlad and David for a long time, there's nobody better. It was great. We've reviewed the staff report. We've reviewed and agree with the findings, the conclusions, and the recommendation of approval, certainly, and would adopt those as part of the record, our record. Oops, back. Again, as Vlad mentioned, it's a zone change, 10.41 acres from ag to ag suburban. Again, it's the underlying comprehensive plan designation is border, which does support the proposed zoning and many of the goals and analysis and descriptions of the border designation. The site, you'll see it is surrounded by agricultural suburban zoning to the west, to the north, to the south, and to the east. I'll kind of touch on that. And directly across the street is the city limits of Post Falls, actually to the southwest. And more directly across the street is the Highlands Golf Course driving range, which I believe is in the county under a conditional use permit. You know, kind of the backstory on this is that the Armstrong family started farming this ground between Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls, I believe, back in the 30s. The applicant, Roy, is a second-generation farmer who's now in his 80s. You know, his health is not the best, so he's unable to attend tonight, but I'm certainly in support. He owns some of these last remaining pieces that are on the agenda tonight. And this is really just some family estate planning. The goal is to actually divide this particular property into two parcels and grant those to family and friends. Two parcels, two lots. In fact, you know, I mentioned in the narrative, that is already actually in his will under testimony provisions. So that division actually will occur upon his death. But you know, like anybody, he wants to make sure that those parcels are conveyed ideally before he passes. So that's kind of where we were at in this process. Again, so we filed the application. The application has been reviewed by the agencies. Again, City of Post Falls, the Highway District, and Health District, all of which are in support or neutral on the request. So I think it's a good part of the record. This is the next slide. That was part of the application. Again, I think you have a good understanding probably of where it's at. Again, between Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, and north side of Mullan Road, and so forth. This kind of zooms in. Topography-wise, it's a level to rolling. There actually historically was a house on the property, and there actually is a well on the property, associated water right. Pretty straightforward. County road, maintained by the Post Falls Highway District, borders it to the south. This is probably the most compelling map. This is the county's zoning map. Indicates the site there. I don't have a pointer here. But again, you can see that agricultural suburban zoning to the west, to the north, to the east, and to the south. I may be incorrect on this, but I want to say the county actually created that agricultural suburban zoning surrounding this site. So this is the opposite of a spot zone. This is kind of correcting maybe a zoning error. In terms of density, against 10 acres, so we're in the county, and under the Panhandle Health District's regulations, it's limited to one house, one unit per 5 acres on septic tank. And that's been in place since, I believe, the early 70s. So the only way to really further develop the property would be to annex and extend sewer, and there's no immediate plans for that at all. Really, this is just estate planning purposes. As we indicated in our application, I think we submitted a very detailed and comprehensive application. It does meet the conditions of approval, the standards for approval. I could walk you right through every one of these if you'd like, but you're more than capable to grasp that and understand that. And that's part of the record, part of the application documents, and we'd also adopt staff's recommendation and their findings as well. So I won't belittle that. Again, reminder, staff has recommended approval based on those draft conclusions. In the recommendation, we request approval of the zone change, that you forward a recommendation to the county commissioners for their review. And with that, I'd stand for questions.
I agree with you. Your application was very thorough. I appreciated that. Thanks. But I have no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Robert Farr is in favor and may wish to speak. Nope. Brian Adams didn't say what position, but may wish to speak. Okay. Jody Daub didn't say, does not wish to speak. Okay. And Lori Daub also didn't say, but may wish to speak. Yes?
My name is Lori Daub, D-A-U-B. I live at 5339 East Heather Lane, Post Falls, just up the road from the property. What I would like to say is we do support the two houses, separating it into the two 5-acre lots with single house on each. We support that. Any kind of a subdivision at all, we don't agree with that. It's just because it's on the aquifer, because it's a quiet area with the golf course there and the farmland that it's been. I certainly understand the family, the generations. But I hope in my lifetime I don't see a subdivision go in that place. So that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I have here. Is there anyone on Zoom that wishes to speak on this case?
No one but staff.
Okay. No need for rebuttal? No? No? Okay. Then that concludes our hearing this evening on case number ZON 24-0003. And we'll move right into our next case, which is case number ZON 24-0004.
Once again, for the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. This is another zone change request by the same property owner, Mr. Roy Armstrong. Case number ZON 24-0004 to rezone a 32-acre parcel of land from agriculture to rural. The subject property is located on the northwest corner of the intersection of Poleline Road and Hutter Road. It is somewhat flat, but it's a bit rolling. It does have some sparse vegetation on the north end of the property, while the majority of it is fairly level, and it looks like it's just could be a hay field or somehow, or may have been farmed in the past. The current zoning designation is agriculture. The property is surrounded by parcels zoned rural to the north as well as to the south. The parcels to the west and southwest, a small parcel at the intersection of Hutter and Poleline, is also zoned agriculture. Parcels east of Hutter Road are all within the city limits of City of Coeur d'Alene. The comp plan designation for this parcel is border, and it's adjacent to transitional comp plan designation to the west. The subject property is also located within the City of Post Falls area of city impact, even though it's adjacent to City of Post Falls on the east side of Hutter Road. The same regulations would apply under Article 10.7 of Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code, where it states that any future development must connect to public sewer and public water, and any re-subdivision must comply with the same standards. We also advised the applicant of the same concerns and directed him to speak with the city official, and we got the same response from the City of Post Falls planning manager. These are some of the photos of the subject property in question. It has really good access east and west on Poleline and north and south on Hutter Road. So depending on how future development will occur, the applicant will have to work with the highway district to assess access and traffic impacts. But for the sake of tonight's hearing, we're here solely for the zone change. I want to remind the public that the findings of fact for a zone change are significantly different than those for a subdivision. So as I mentioned, we did solicit comments from the same agencies. Everybody was on board. However, in my view, the City of Post Falls comment is somewhat, to me, concerning, but it doesn't explicitly state that a subdivision will be denied. We'll just have to see if the zone change is approved, what the city would say in terms of waiving those requirements. I must add that based on the most recent change, the legislature adopted a new set of regulations where the counties now are obligated to go through a review and amendment process to modify all of the existing ACIs in the state of Idaho. As I understand, that needs to be accomplished before the end of 2025. We don't know what the result of that process will be, how the ACI agreements will be modified, what provisions of those agreements will be incorporated directly into the Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code, and how the county will administer that. That is something that I believe we're currently sort of in the inception stages of that process. And when that's finalized, perhaps the current provisions may not be an issue, or may not be a hurdle for the applicant to jump through once that process is complete. So just want to put that on the record that that's something that we will be moving forward on as a department. During the agency public comment period, we received only one comment in support of this application, no opposition. Staff analysis. Our analyses are very similar but slightly different with regards to the potential future subdivision. We find that the proposal meets the findings for a zone change. We do believe that if the city is able to waive those ACI requirements in the future, that should the applicant pursue a minor subdivision, because the property can be subdivided into as many as 6 parcels of land, the current regulations state that any subdivision of 4 or fewer lots must go through a minor subdivision process, and 5 or greater must go through a major subdivision process. So if the ACI requirements are waived by the city, the director, community development director, has the right or has the discretion to waive those requirements and approve a minor subdivision, so long as the applicant complies with all the conditions of approval to mitigate impacts. However, if the applicant chooses to go through a major subdivision and create as many as 5 or 6 lots, then unfortunately we don't know what the hearing body will decide, whether the hearing examiner or the Board of County Commissioners will uphold the city's desire to waive those requirements, or if they will adhere to the strict letter of the law in terms of connection to public sewer and water and deny a subsequent subdivision. This unfortunately has not been tested, at least as far as I can recall, because typically we advise the public, if you are pursuing a major subdivision, it's a great risk that even if the city does waive those requirements, the elected officials may say, unfortunately, we cannot agree with the city's position, and we will adhere to the strict letter of the law and deny this application. So it's unknown at this time whether or not both the city and future elected officials would be on board to subdivide this property should it go through a major subdivision process. Otherwise, we find that the proposal is compatible with the surrounding land use development, obviously in the unincorporated area of Kootenai County, because anything within the city is obviously small parcels of land, quarter-acre size lots, because they have public sewer and water. But as it stands, the development in the area is 5 to 10-acre parcels of land with single-family residential structures and outbuildings on them. So in that regard, we don't see the zone change as being problematic. Should you have any questions, I can address them at this time.
I don't have any, thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Marshall.
Again, for the record, I'm Brad Marshall with JEB Engineers, 7825 Meadowlark Way, Coeur d'Alene 83815. Again, it's a pleasure to represent Roy Armstrong in the request for the zone change that we're hearing tonight. For 31.90 acres. Don't we love technology? It's a love-hate. Yeah, you got to do the enable editing.
See the X on the top right? There. Not that one, that one. There.
Is this the correct one?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Again, we want to thank the hearing examiner for being here tonight, as well as staff for their help on the application. Again, we've reviewed the staff report and agree with the findings, analysis, and the conclusions, but adopt that report as part of our reasons for approval. Vlad, you're killing me, man. Again, it's a zone change for 31.9 acres from agricultural to rural. Again, the underlying comprehensive plan designation is border, which supports limited development of the site. The site is surrounded by, surrounded by primarily rural zoning, and I'll kind of get into that in a minute. There's rural zoning to the north, to the south, city limits to the east, and further rural zoning to the west. Again, the city limits of Coeur d'Alene are to the east on Hutter Road, and the Core Terre land development is to the east of that, with a planned 20-30 year build out of that project. Again, as I mentioned in the prior hearing, and for the record, again, this is really just estate planning purposes for the Armstrong family. with the goal of dividing the property in just two parcels through a minor subdivision process. And again, the property is set up through a will right now to be conveyed. So by going through the two-lot minor subdivision process, what the county and ultimately the city will get out of that is a right-of-way dedications for Poleline and Hutter Road, and easement dedications, versus if those roads were widened at a later date, there's an eminent domain process, the purchase of that property. This is the opportunity for acquisition without paying a right-of-way agent, a realtor, or actually paying for the land itself. And again, this just allows a widening of the property. We'll also work with the city on future utility easements for sewer. So allows kind of to and through on that. And in this case, as of both, this property is in the Ross Point Water District, and there's actually a water main adjacent to this property in Poleline Road. Again, the agencies have had an opportunity to review this application. Again, the highway, fire, and health districts, we have met and called the city of Post Falls. We've talked this through. Again, the city, by working with us on two-lot minor, gets right-of-way and easements, utilities, extensions. And again, the property is limited to 1 unit per 5 acres under the health district regulations. But even though we'll go through just a two-lot minor subdivision in the future. Again, Vlad did an excellent job of kind of illustrating where the property is. We have a good grasp of that. Relatively, if not level, the majority of it. There isn't an abandoned canal on the property. There's a historic canal on the property. These are dry. There's no wetlands or seasonal streams or anything like that in there. And they were truly have gone through an abandonment process 25 plus years ago, because I remember it. And I've recently walked those. There's dry as a bone. This is the county zoning map. And again, we're seeking a zone change from ag to rural. And you can see that large swath of rural zoning to the south. I believe it's what's called Brickard Estates, and a large swath of rural zoning to the north in Big Sky Estates. And again, to say limits to the east, and some, again, that ag suburban zoning mixed into it as well. So very compatible with the adjacent zoning, no different. And again, almost an infill, the opposite of a spot zone. Again, the zone change meets the application. The application meets the code requirements for approval. I'll adopt these as part of the record. On that note, the PowerPoints are been provided to Vlad. They're part of the record, so we would adopt those to speak to this. With that, again, we appreciate the assistance of the hearing examiner and staff, and based on those application, the support of the agencies, the staff, little or no opposition, would respectfully request approval on behalf of the Armstrong family.
Thank you. Once again, very well done application materials.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions?
No.
Thanks.
Robert Farr is in favor and may wish to speak. Ronald McGee is in favor and may wish to speak.
My name's Ron McGee, and I live at 7253 West Big Sky Drive. My son and I own 2 of the 5-acre lots just north of Roy's property, bordering Hutter. And we agree with the zone change to keep it to 5 acres. There is a lot of trees on the north side of this parcel, and I guess we have faith in Mr. Marshall to design lots that will save as many trees as possible. Thank you.
Okay. Brett Haney in favor may wish to speak?
I'm okay.
Okay. John McGuire doesn't say what your feelings are, but that you may wish to speak.
My name is John McGuire. I live at 6999 West Big Sky Drive, which is one of the lots that's just north of this property. Our concern is, again, hopefully, that it'll remain somewhat of a border between us and them, so we don't see them, they don't see us in the future. But again, we realize we can't control something like that. So overall, if we stay with the requirement of the 5 acres and maybe a couple of properties being built in there, that'd really be a nice thing. And also, I want to make a quick comment. That intersection at Hanley is going nuts right now. I don't know, we live in that area and it's just crazy. I can't imagine building 2 beautiful homes on that property and then having the traffic flow outside right there. But anyways, I just like to see it stay that way with the trees. But again, we know once something's approved, they can do what they want to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Adams doesn't say what your feeling is, but you may wish to speak.
My name is Brian Adams. I live at 6950 East Poleline Avenue, and that's just south of the property. Hanley and Poleline right there, it's just crazy. It's crazy busy since they put it through, and the stoplights are not great. I mean, it backs up for 3/4 of a mile in the mornings. Yeah. I'd like to see it stay 5-acre parcels. I don't want to see a bunch of what they're doing on the Coeur d'Alene side of the street. It's very sad what's going on over there. So we have nice 5-acre rural properties, and we'd like to see it keep it that way. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the comment sheets I have. Do you have anyone on Zoom?
No one on Zoom other than staff.
Okay. Rebuttal? Nope. Okay.
Madam Hearing Examiner,
Yes.
I can add one thing that may be useful, and that is the state legislature, when they changed the law to say that municipalities must adopt new, what are being called AIs, and there's no coincidence that that's the new term, because the very first paragraph of the new state law says counties will be in control of the new AIs.
Oh.
So it's obviously purposeful on the legislature's part to take away those kinds of requirements that Vlad just showed on the screen. So it's entirely possible, if this development just waits till the new AIs are in place, that there can be no requirement from the cities for additional infrastructure. Vlad?
I'd like to add something to Director Callahan's statement. Is it fair to say that at this point, the county is still obligated to disclose those concerns to members of the public at pre-application meetings until such time that we know what's going to happen with our current ACIs before they turn into AIs? Is that true?
Of course.
Okay.
Because people could choose to pull the trigger right now, if you'll pardon the metaphor.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks. That was helpful. Okay. That concludes our hearing this evening on case number ZON 24-0004, and we are adjourned.